You don't have any Stephen King?
You've got the shinin.
You mean shiny.
Shh. Wanna get sued?
It's just your fate. You're that geeky Stephen King kid. There's one of you in every school.
Okay, that's him, that's Cujo,
I was thinking along the lines of no TV and no beer make Homer something.
Oh, crazy.
Don't mind if I do!
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast celebrating the work of Stephen King, hosted by two lifelong constant readers. We do non-spoiler and spoiler reviews of King's published work and take a critical look at his film and television adaptations as well. We also discuss the latest King news and check in with each other on our ongoing King obsessions. It's the podcast where all things serve the King. You can find more of our work at towerjunkiespod.com. You can also like the Facebook page at facebook.com/towerjunkiespod and follow us on Twitter and every other level of social media at Tower Junkies Pod. And while every episode of the podcast will always be free, you can find more of, or I'm sorry, I just read the previous paragraph. I just started that. While every episode of the podcast will always be free, if you want to support us, support what we do here, you can become a patron at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for a ridiculous amount of bonus content spread across all of our various podcasts. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Hurt, and joining me today, as usual, is Tiny. And we are being graced with the presence of a special guest this week, Kim C from the delightful Year of Underrated Stephen King podcast, returning champion guest. After having us both on her show, she is willing to talk to us again, this time with both of us. So, welcome to the show, Kim. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, hello, friends. It's so great to be back and be with both of you. I got double prizes. I'm very happy.
Nice. Well, welcome to the show. And of course, we're just huge fans of your show. We've both been on it. And I loved listening to your guys' episode, like you talking to Tiny and everything. And it was kind of surreal and fun to hear Tiny talk to someone else. But yeah.
Yes, I'm delightful.
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah. Why don't you go ahead and refresh our listeners with, even though they should know by now, they need to listen to your podcast. What your show is all about and what you've got kind of coming up on the show.
I would love to. It's great to be back. But for those of you who haven't found the show yet, I am a university English teacher, and I started a Stephen King podcast because I fell in love with the less popular King novels, the ones that really don't get a lot of time in the sunshine, and I think there's some brilliant writing in them, and I wanted to share that with people and listeners and other constant readers who could chat about these books with me. So while I do love the Stephen King heavy hitters, the big bestsellers, and the ones that have all the movie adaptations, we got some quiet diamonds in the treasure box. So I am spending some time hopscotching around these underrated novels. I'm reading them for the very first time, the ones that we just don't hear a lot about. And I am making my way through the Dark Tower series for the very first time.
Yes. Yep. I'm so excited about that still. Like, we had you on to talk about the Wastelands and a little bit of the Gunslinger and Drawing of the Three. And it's so much fun to hear your thought process as you're going through it. It's a blast. So do you want to give us a progress report on Wizard and Glass?
Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay.
Yeah.
So
if I'm not putting you too much on the spot.
No, I'm freaking out of sheer, nice. I'm so excited to be back with the quartet, and we are in this Kansas place right now and then there's this, I just learned about a thinny. Holy hell, a thinny. Whoa. And then there's like this green glass building that they have made it to. And It's very Wizard of Oz, like Dorothy, Toto, Wizard of Oz vibes. I'm loving it. And then we have just made a huge jump into Roland's past. There's some lady, this old person, Rhea, I think. So I'm like, what is happening? So I am loving it, you guys. I am fully nerding out and can't really read fast enough. I just wish that my life would leave me alone. I don't want to be an adult. I just want to read Wizard and Glass.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That one is just so, it's so rich. It's so rich in character and with backstory of Roland. I love it so much. I love it so much. I can't wait to like hear your podcast thoughts on it and everything.
I have a feeling this is a thick one, and I know I'm not going to be able to contain my excitement for one part, so I'm going to have to two-part it. I'm just going to have to.
Oh, yeah.
Choice.
Yep, I'm just going to have to back up the truck and do a part one and let it loose because, oh my gosh, I am so excited to be back with everybody. And can you remind me the years between Wastelands and Wizard and Glass? Because I want to say it was pretty lengthy for fans, so I feel like it's been a while for me. I can't imagine what it was like for actual fans of the series.
Yeah, I don't know, because Tiny and I, we read it all in like one go in turn, like over the course of like a year, I think. And so I'm just doing some quick math here. Wizard and Glass came out in 97. So Wizard and Glass was published in November 1997 and The Wastelands was published in 91. So there was a 6-year gap between it.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then yeah. Was it really 90? Yeah, because then there was another 6-year gap between Wizard and Glass and the final 3. Yep. Yeah. Which, speaking of which, we just passed the anniversary of Stephen King's accident. June 19th, 1999 is when he had his accident, which is I'm just super thankful that he's still here.
Aren't we all?
Of course. Yeah.
Way too close there.
Oh yeah. And the detail he goes into in on writing about it is just excruciating. It's so painful to read. Yeah. But he's healthy now. It's good. He's okay.
He'll live forever, I swear. Exactly.
Okay, so Kim, where can we find your podcast, The Year of Underrated Stephen King?
I am featured on Apple Podcasts, a lot of the sort of podcast players out there, Underrated SK Pod at Twitter and Instagram, or you can always say hi the old school way, as I am an old school teacher, at underratedsk@gmail if you want to say hi or listen to a past episode and you want to give me some cool ideas or observations. I love direct quotes because literary analysis is my jam, my butter and jam, so I will definitely have some fun nerding out with direct quotes. But yeah, I love to connect with listeners, and I really like taking my time on these novels and looking at them the way that we would in school. So I'm bringing a little bit of academia to the Stephen King family, at least I hope.
Nice. Yeah, well, we're huge fans of it, of your show and everything, and we're delighted to have you here. Yeah. Tiny, any thoughts on anything we went through?
On anything.
Yes.
Well, it all started 35 years ago at a hospital in Indianapolis.
Nice.
A cold January. No. I'm ready to get talking about these short stories we got tonight.
Nice. Absolutely. So today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about 2 fantastic short stories from the Skeleton Crew collection. And if I may just throw out a quick shameless plug, on Patreon at the $2 level, I have done what I'm dubbing the Church of Kings series, where I'm going through his collected short fiction works, and basically what I'm doing is reading a story and then I'm recording my thoughts on it and putting those recordings together and releasing them in just these big chunks of episodes on Patreon. So I've done Night Shift and Skeleton Crew, and I think, and I'm currently working on Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And like Night Shift runs, I mean, a 5-part series that's like 6 hours long, I think. And then Skeleton Crew is six parts and 6 hours just about, and Nightmares and Dreamscapes is going to be the same. So check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. At the $2 level, you get that plus just a ton of other just ridiculous bonus stuff that I post on there. So yeah, so when revisiting these stories in the Skeleton Crew collection, I was just like, okay, these stories are just upper echelon for me, and I'm just so excited to talk about them with you guys. So do you guys want to go ahead and go into our thoughts on the first story, which is The Jaunt?
Let's do it.
All right, awesome. So The Jaunt was first published in the Twilight Zone magazine in 1981, which, by the way, shameless plug again, I've relaunched my Twilight Zone podcast anthology, anthologypod.com. Yes. So, so The Jaunt is a story about the invention of teleportation, and it is told through the perspective of a man who is trying to explain to his children that they have nothing to worry about as they jaunt to Mars for a job opportunity. I think it's Mars. And yeah, throughout the course of the story, we learn a lot of things, and it ends on a humdinger of an ending that is haunting. So what did you guys think of The Jaunt in non-spoilers? And then if we need spoilers, we can go into spoilers later. But The Jaunt, what are your guys' thoughts on this short story?
First.
Oh, thank you so much. Such chivalry here. You guys are such gents. So I read Skeleton Crew for the first time just at the beginning of the year. So The Jaunt, I had always heard it with such reverence, like, oh my God, The Jaunt. And so I enjoyed the dystopian world building that King brings to this, because one of my big observations / complaints with King's writing sometime is that he doesn't world build enough. And we got a really hefty dose of some cool apocalyptic content inside here, and it was really cool. However, and so I read it again. Again for the pod, so I'd be nice and fresh and ready to roll, being a profesh. And so I read it again because I did have a little issue with the ending, and we can talk about that later.
Okay.
Because while it is quite chilling and effective, I felt a little bratty about it, and I was unable to suspend my disbelief on some things. However, I like the fact that the structure of this story is, as you mentioned, a father talking to his children, but then we also have the scientist who discovered it, Victor Carroon. So we have these huge deviations about Victor and how he discovered teleportation. I thought that was pretty cool. So there's a lot to appreciate in this story, but for being super duper sci-fi, Stevie's, I was like, Steve, I know you were trying to go minimalist. I got a real Brave New World vibe about this. Like, I know he was trying to go real minimal and sleek. I was like, but Steve, that doesn't make sense. And so, so I really, really like The Jaunt. I really like it. Do I love it? No.
Interesting. Okay. Nice. I was gonna say you've laid down the gauntlet, or should I say jauntlet, for this discussion. That's dumb.
Classic Matt.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Tiny, what are your thoughts on The Jaunt? Because you just recently read it for the first time, like very recently, I believe, right?
A couple weeks ago.
Nice.
And thankfully I was able to listen to it a second time. I listened to the audiobook Audible. So I really enjoyed it myself. It seemed a little unconventional for Stephen King because of the sci-fi aspect. It's really fitting that it premiered in the Twilight Zone magazine, because it totally feels like a Twilight Zone episode. And you know, King draws from the sci-fi well several times throughout his career, but this feels like I mean, it really does feel like a Twilight Zone episode. It feels very kind of like pop sci-fi. Where there's this, it's sort of like Philip K. Dick kind of feeling to it, where it's this very kind of fluid, straightforward kind of thing, and then it has this little horror ending at the end of it, which is again on par for the Twilight Zone. But it seemed it just seemed kind of out of left field for him, or just not in his wheelhouse, I guess. But I think he did a fantastic job with it. I kind of think Kim and I might agree with the ending. It's a little, just a little, I don't even know how to say it really, or maybe we can get to it better in spoilers. But yeah, it's the journey's fun though, and it's interesting how I would have thought I wouldn't have been receptive to it, because it's very exposition-y. It's a guy literally telling a story to his kids, and it's not even a story. It's kind of explaining something to his kids, and it kind of seems like that wouldn't be the best idea. He makes it work, and I think it you know, if someone tried to adapt this, I think it would be you'd have to kind of change the format, I think. But I ended up liking it quite a bit, and
Nice.
I was just really had a good time with how kind of out of the wheelhouse of Stephen King it was.
Yeah, that's what really struck me about it, was that it did feel like that just more hardcore science fiction that we don't really see in King's writing. And when we do see it in his writing, it doesn't really work quite as well normally. Like I'm thinking of like the Tommyknockers or Dreamcatcher having more of a sci-fi horror bend. But here is like, this story to me just really grabbed me because of, like Kim said, the world building, the way that King utilizes his strength as a storyteller, and how it's an example that's used in tons of Stephen King's work over the decades, that the structure of it is a character telling a story to other characters, and that story kind of coming to life through the storytelling that he's giving to his sons, or to his son and daughter. Like that, the way that kind of divulges information to us as the audience, versus giving us information about the world and the kind of social and economical and industrial, I guess, ramifications of teleportation and everything, is just really interesting to me. and I just really like the way that King kind of thinks these things through, and then spends the time to really kind of dive into them and explain certain aspects of it that you wouldn't really necessarily think about or want to really consider when you just want to do like a fun little sci-fi story. So I don't know, I just really appreciate the storytelling there. But yeah, the ending worked for me, but I'm very eager to kind of talk about it with you guys, because it's pretty crazy. Yeah,
it's kind of, I didn't mention the world building. It's kind of amazing what he was able to achieve with a short story too.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a big hill to climb to establish all this backstory and this character that's, you know, invented this thing and his story. And you wouldn't think the whole economic side of it and everything, you just wouldn't expect that much depth in a short story.
Yeah.
He manages to pull it off. I mean, he's a master. He pulled it off.
Oh yeah,
totally. I'm so glad you mentioned Philip K. Dick, Tiny, because that is such a great comparison. Or, who's the guy? Fahrenheit 450. Bradbury.
Oh, Bradbury.
I got a real Bradbury vibe as well, where King really went futurist in this story, which I think is a rarity for us in his work, because he just doesn't go that deep, and he went real deep. He talked about frighteningly contemporary subjects of like water wars and interstellar oil gathering and just frightening resource depletion, and you're like, this is too timely. But I loved it. I love how he went real futurist with this story, and it's very cool.
Oh yeah. And in the collection there's another story called Beach World that is another like very much heavy sci-fi futurist story, but it doesn't really work as well as the Jaunt for me, just because it's more of a conventional storytelling kind of structure, and it doesn't have that just power behind it that the Jaunt does. It kind of, like, the Jaunt reads like King is very excited to explore the world that he created in this short story, and that really comes through in a big way. And yeah, it's just, it's so colorful with detail, and even like you were talking about, Kim, the kind of dystopian aspect of it, like the use of like prisoners and everything, and the testing of the teleportation and the jaunting and stuff is just handled so expertly in the way that it creates this just almost normalization of the completely kind of insane and morally heinous and morally questionable stuff, kind of all around this creation of basically just teleportation, like a way to get people from point A to point B. It's really cool. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah,
He owns it. He just like owns it in this story. He just gets in there and he's like, yep, this is what the world will look like in 2300.
Yep.
Teleportation is discovered in 1987, and we go all the way into the year 2300, where it is just a day's work to jaunt to Mars for a couple months.
Yep.
Oh, that's wild.
It's so wild. It's so insane. I think, Tiny, you mentioned about adapting it. There was like news about it being adapted into a TV series at some point. I don't know if that's still in development or not. That was relatively recently, within the last couple of years, but then obviously COVID, so who knows. But how would you guys want to see this adapted? Would you want to see like a feature film, like movie, or would you want a limited series or a full-fledged TV series? What do you guys think?
I think I could really go either way. I'm such a big TV buff now. I feel like that's where all the glory is right now.
Yeah.
Not that there's bad movies, but I just love TV right now. And so part of me is saying Black Mirror, full on Black Mirror episode would be fantastic. But like I said earlier, I'm a little worried that some of that world building would get lost in the shuffle for time constraints, unless it was like a 2-hour episode.
Yeah.
Black Mirror's never done, so I wouldn't see that happening. And then I feel like a movie could get a way overproduced, too many cooks in the kitchen kind of situation.
Yeah,
like what happened with the Dark Tower movie.
We don't talk about the Dark Tower movie.
I crossed the line.
Yes.
But yeah, I could see it going either way. But I guess if I had to choose, I would say let's make it a Black Mirror episode. That would be really fun to see.
You're speaking my language like that. Now that's all I'm going to be thinking about is if they were to adapt this into a Black Mirror episode. Holy crap. Yeah. Kim, how would you adapt it? How would you want to see it adapted?
My first thought was limited series. Like, let's do it. Let's just go big and do a whole, just expand on the characters, and we could all be jaunt workers, and like this is just part of normal society. The world is a toilet and everybody jaunts and just have a bunch of characters, and let's do it. But then I thought about what you mentioned about the Twilight Zone aspect of it, and there is something very close to that formula that I think needs to be preserved in. So I feel you're right, Tiny, like a really punchy Black Mirror kind of, maybe 90-minute. Could we get like a 90-minuter? That would be cool, because the ending is the reason why people remember this story. It is all about that punchy ending. So I think if we expanded that, the magic might get lost a little bit. Because if we did a limited series, we would have to have a lot of punchy endings just like that, and then it would just be a terror fest, and then who knows. But I do agree that we probably would have to stick to its roots and just do like a really freaky one-off.
Yeah. it's funny because I have been of the thought that, oh yeah, this should definitely be like just a feature film, like one and done feature film, no sequels, no franchise, nothing like that. But the thought of packaging it into like a Black Mirror episode is just too tantalizing for me. Like, that is perfect. And like, I know that I was ecstatic to hear this, but they are working on the new season of Black Mirror, and they specifically said, like, yeah, this is going to be huge in terms of like episodes. Like, the episodes are going to be like movies. They're going to be like feature length. So I don't know, someone should really get the Jaunt like kind of under the nose of Charlie Brooker and have him adapt it, because that would be such a perfect fit. But yeah, and I kind of think that the structure of this story and the way that it is very much a Twilight Zone-y type of story, I think that that's one of the reasons that it really speaks to me, because I, of course, shameless plug of Anthology Pod, I'm sorry, I just recently got to the halfway point of the Twilight Zone, and it's my first time watching the show. I'm podcasting about it and everything, and it's literally like one of my absolute favorite shows and favorite experiences. So as I'm kind of learning more about the Twilight Zone as I do the podcast, I'm seeing all of the Twilight Zone influence on King, like all of like the times that Rod Serling has influenced Stephen King in one way or the other. And the Jaunt is, in some cases, sort of an ode, or an ode to like the Twilight Zone and like Richard Matheson and other like writers of like that were connected to the Twilight Zone. And of course, you know, we just said his name, Philip K. Dick, so who never did a Twilight Zone episode. But anyway, it's just like that symmetry and like of influence to finished creative output from King is just really, really cool and appetizing to me. So that's what really drew me to this story. Yeah. Sorry if I rambled there.
Oh, that was great.
Nice. Okay, should we talk about the ending and go into spoilers?
Gotta do it.
Okay, all right. I'm going to play some music, and then we're going to come back and talk spoilers for The Jaunt, so stay tuned. All right, and spoilers on for The Jaunt. So the end of the story is the kid opened his eyes when he shouldn't have, and his mind was completely thrust into eternity, and the haunting final lines are, it's longer than you think, because it's the time he spends with his eyes opened is an eternity. So you got, like, I was just floored by it. Absolutely floored by the ending. I loved it. It was haunting. It haunts my dreams. It's horrifying. What did you guys think of the ending, and how did it? I don't want to have such a loaded question, but what didn't really work for you guys?
Hey, Kim.
Okay. So where I had some problems is, so when you jaunt, the way it works is you have to be asleep. So in this sort of jaunt launch facility they're all in, it's similar to an airport is what King describes. A mask is put over your face, you are unconscious, and you jaunt. And that's the only way it works, because if you are not asleep, you will jaunt into eternal nothingness. And basically, your brain turns to scrambled eggs. And then when you get to the other side, not only are you crazy, but you are old as hell, right? You are just... And so the young son, I don't think it's a direct quote, but he's close. He said, I took the mask off, or I didn't go to sleep. Like I held my breath. I forget the direct quote, but he doesn't let the gas make him go to sleep because he was so curious. So when he jaunts, as you mentioned, and he claws his eyes out, we got to remember that part.
Yes.
He claws his eyes out, just carnage and horror. So my only problem is I know that, and again, I'm trying to let this go. I think I just need to let it go. But the way I see it is, okay, jaunting is just a part of futuristic society. And I was like, and you wouldn't plug anybody into vital signs? Like, you wouldn't have vital signs for any paying customer to transport them interstellar travel? Like, no heart monitor would have been hooked up at all? Like, I can't. And so I know I just need to let it go. But for me, it's like, okay, we are an advanced civilized society. Every single person would have had vital signs, heart rate, oxygen. Like, they would have been able to detect that he wasn't yet asleep or unconscious. Like, I just was like, right. And you're right. I need to let it go. And maybe I will. But I was just like, really? We as a species, you just jaunted somebody, some kid, and he wasn't asleep? Really? So I know that sounds super bratty, and it's hard with sci-fi. It's hard. He was going for a more minimalist approach, but that is why I like the jaunt. But that ending is terrifying. But I think I liked the prison experiment more than the final ending.
Interesting.
Because that guy awoke. And then he like has a stroke right away. And also, if the young boy, he goes into eternity and comes out, he's ranting, you would be nonverbal at that point. Like, you would be like, he would just be screaming and drooling. Like, I don't even think he would have language at the. I thought about it too long. I nerded out. Tiny, I passed the mic.
Yeah, I'm glad you went first because that's exactly what I was going to say. I think
wow.
300 years in the future, we don't have like a medical chip implanted in the back of our brain that's telling us whether or not we're awake or not. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Wow. I agree with that fully. I also think two other things. Gas is like, no, they wouldn't use gas because gas is a very temporary, like, you know, if you go to the dentist and you have dental work and they give you the laughing gas or whatever, like the mask has to stay on your face. And within a couple minutes of taking it off, you're awake and wearing off and you would be conscious, you know? So I think it would be chemical. I think you'd get an injection to knock you out. So there's no risk of someone doing something like that. And then the other thing was, gosh, what was I going to say? Oh, I think the whole thing of like their hair turns white.
Yeah,
that's just like a little. You saw that in an adaptation. That would just be kind of dumb. Like a little 12-year-old kid with jet white hair. It would like kind of took me out of it for a second. I was like a tiny little. He looks like Benjamin Button, you know, sitting there. That would just be silly, I think.
Oh wow!
I don't dislike it, and I kind of love the ending because did you guys listen to the audiobook or did you both read it?
I did both.
Yeah, I did physical and audio. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think the performance. I don't remember the actor who read it. I can't remember his name because they use like 20 different people for this.
Yeah.
It added to the chill. His performance added to the chill. Like I genuinely give him credit for that because I think he could have kind of crossed the line and sort of been a little goofy to hear him going crazy essentially. But I think he did a good job and it added to how effective and chilling it was. His performance was good and that added to it and gave it another layer that I really liked. But those are my minor issues with the ending. It just took me out of it for a second, but I still like the ending and like the story. Like Kim said, I don't know if I love it.
Right. Yeah. The I totally agree with you on that part wholeheartedly. It is, and the narrator's performance definitely heightens it. Like you get to sense that madness. But I do love, and reading it again before the show, what I loved is it's a fast transition. The dad jaunts, and then in like one line, everyone is screaming, people are running, and so you as the reader are like, oh my God. So there's a really cool suspenseful drop when we see like, oh my God, something really bad happened, and then he describes what the boy looks like. So yeah, there's a lot to appreciate in that final moment. But it'll take me time, but I'm like, I just feel like this. I like it a lot, but it prevents me from loving it. It just really prevents me from loving it. And every person I meet who's like, I'm obsessed with the Jaunt, it's the best story. I was like, can we talk? Can we chat a little bit?
Yeah. And those are completely valid criticisms and everything. And I was trying to find the narrator, but I couldn't Google quick enough. But yeah, I feel like I am just way more forgiving, like to a fault, for like science fiction stuff like that. Because you guys are absolutely right. Like you would think that they would make sure that their vitals are completely in check and that they are completely sedated and completely ready to go. But then again, we're also talking about a society that kind of experimented on prisoners and did like these very like morally objecting morally like horrible kind of things to get the technology down. So I would think like if I were to make excuses, I would say, well, maybe the people in charge don't have like the necessary like governmental oversight, because the government doesn't care about the citizens. They just care about the bottom line and the economic implications of being able to, jaunt people across the known universe so that they can make money for them. That's my rationale. That's my making excuses for King segment of the podcast.
It works. It totally works. And sometimes I always do a TK edit. So my edit was, I wish we could have got more present day, like people who jaunt all the time. Like, are you able to jaunt all the time? Because my thought, similar to yours, Matt, was like, what if one of the nurses had just recently jaunted and she's like something, like an error, a human error, like she just hit the button before, something simple like that, where we had the effects of jaunting harm future jaunters. I don't know. That would be my edit. If I was on the Black Mirror episode and I was on the storyboard team, I would be like, this is what we're doing.
Nice.
Nice. I like that.
Nice. Yeah, that would be an interesting angle. And if they do make the TV series, like, I think that there are so many applications that can be used. Like, they can do like conspiracy aspects to it, and I just think that King has laid the groundwork for a very cool, like, dystopian futuristic story. So yeah, it took me a little bit to warm up to the idea of doing a TV series, but if they do, I will be all over that and reviewing it for sure. Like every episode on Patreon.
Kind of a fun little story that I'm glad I listened to. Sometimes audiobooks aren't the best medium for reading a story. There was a fun little that happened. I'm glad I listened to the audiobook for this, because there's a part where kind of a little vignette that's in the story where King is talking about someone who used the Jaunt to murder his wife. I don't remember the character's name, but it's kind of a short, probably like a paragraph or two, but he's saying like the guy like worked at a Jaunt lab or something, and he basically tied his wife up and put in no destination, just threw her through the portal, and she lost in purgatory, basically.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And so it moves to, he gets arrested and he's on trial. And his lawyer is saying, well, you prove that she actually died? Should he be should he be convicted of murder? Because you can't really prove that she's actually dead. So I have a degree in criminal justice, and I kind of wanted to go that route for a long time. And so in my mind, I have those gears those synapses kind of link up in my head, and I'm like, that's a really interesting point. How would you prove that she's actually dead? And then as the gears are turning in my head, next sentence he says, like, character ended up being convicted of murder and they put him to death. I was like, oh Jesus. Like I audibly was like, oh damn, like I didn't even get to run with that for longer because they just killed him. I was like, man, this is really a dystopian story. But in retrospect made me laugh.
Nice. I forgot about that.
I forgot about that part. And that's such a huge part. And I forgot about it. And it's so awesome. So awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Holy crap. That's awesome. So any parting thoughts on the Jaunt? To kind of wrap up this review of the Jaunt, where would you rank it in the story? Like, Tiny, I know you haven't read that much short fiction of King's, but where would you guys rank it in terms of, like, overall King writing in short fiction?
Again,
I think I would give it an honorable mention for right now. It doesn't really break into my silver, bronze, gold, but it's an honorable mention. It's definitely warming the bench because there's a lot to appreciate there. And I'm really loving a second read. Mm-hmm. And I was pleased that we talked about it because I did read it again and enjoyed it much more the second time, because I think that first time you're like, all right, what's going on? And everyone says this is a crazy good story and I'm going to love it. And so you go into with it with a lot of preconceived notions and things that you're ready to plug in. Like, I'm supposed to like this. And then, then you get, so this second read really gave a lot more. And I found myself loving the futurism that King did. And it's a fascinating topic. Like, interstellar jaunting is so cool.
Oh, yeah.
And the premise is just fire hot. I really, really like it. So this is an honorable mention for me.
Nice. I currently have it listed as my number 2 favorite Stephen King short story.
Damn.
Yeah, and I kind of stand by that. I think that as I go through the collections again, there's bound to be something that'll pop up that will really, really just reinvigorate me and really jump up in my mind and everything. But for now, it is my number 2. It is right above, actually it's right above Sometimes They Come Back from Night Shift, which I still think is a fantastic short story. Kim, have you read Night Shift at all yet?
Not yet. I know. Okay. For shame. I know that's the hot girl in school, right? So we went in, she's real popular, right? So we are waiting to spend time with her until later. We've got a lot of other nice folk with great personalities, and we're gonna date them first.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah,
that's great.
The thing about Night Shift,
I know that collection is just amazing, and I'm excited to read it. I really am. Yeah. But we're gonna take our time. We'll get
nice. That is understandable, and I think I may have said this to you at some point, either on your show or on here or wherever. But Night Shift is like it's basically the Cat from Hell story from Just After Sunset. That just crazy bonkers Cat from Hell story. It is that for an entire collection. It's that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because the Cat from Hell was written around the time that he wrote like these stories and everything, and it's like it is so quick, so dirty, so just gritty. It's clearly like one of the most fascinating things about Night Shift for me is that it's clearly King writing to put food on the table and put penicillin in his kids for their illnesses and stuff. Like he's hungry and he's writing to put food on the table, and it is just nuts. It's awesome. Yeah.
That was amazing.
Oh, thank you. And Tiny, you haven't read any of Night Shift, have you?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Okay.
I'm even less experienced in short stories than both of you guys are. So,
nice.
But my thoughts on it, I really enjoyed the story a lot. I mean, I kind of ragged on it a little bit, but yeah, it's really fun. It made me think. I was curious about it because I know it was like a teleportation story, and there's The Fly already exists, and I love that movie. That's more like a biological, physical exploration of how teleportation is, and I really like the aspect, I didn't mention this, of this story, that it kind of touches on consciousness, and a really cool line that the main character Mark says. He says, your consciousness doesn't particulate. It's not tangible. So, transportation or teleportation is a physical thing that takes physical particles and moves them. Your consciousness is not a physical thing. And I thought that was a very cool point to touch on. And I'm glad that King kind of ran with that. That's sort of the theme that gets us to the conflict at the end. That was really fun. So yeah, I don't have any kind of short story list going yet or anything, because I haven't read enough of it yet. But I see this kind of being in the middle of the pack probably in the long run, because I know there's some really great ones out there and some not great ones. So, but yeah, I definitely liked it.
Awesome.
I love the science. Science, I love that we keep finding those little nuggets of science, because I'm like, oh yeah, this story is so sciencey, super sciencey.
Absolutely. All right, well, that is our review of the Jaunt, and let us go ahead and move on to the second review of the evening. Survivor Type, also in Skeleton Crew, also just nuts. It was first published in the 1982 horror anthology Terrors, and it was actually adapted into the first segment of a Creepshow animated special on Shudder in 2020, starring the vocal talents of Stephen King alum Kiefer Sutherland and Faina Sanchez. So Survivor Type is about a physician or surgeon who is shipwrecked on a very small island with no hope of rescue, no food, and only a bunch of heroin and his medical know-how. And what he does is very crazy and very just, it's so interesting to me. So Survivor Type, what did you guys think of this short story that Stephen King himself has said is very nasty? I can't remember the exact phrasing, but yeah. He has said some things about it. What did you guys think of Survivor Type?
Like him.
Oh, sweet Anthony, you're so nice. So
I just want to plagiarize what you say, actually.
There you go.
All right. So when I read Survivor Type, I felt very similar to how I felt with the Jaunt, because we got some implausibility toward the end, just a little bit. However, here's where the magic happened. So after I finished Skeleton Crew, move on to other stuff on the podcast, I kept thinking about Survivor Type. Nice. And I'm like, why? What is wrong with you, Kim C? Like, let it go. It's just this guy. But we have a truly amazing story, and I think the ending is what people remember, and that's what gets this story sensationalized. Is it's pretty zany, it's pretty wild at the end. But when I spend some time with it again for this second read, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is beautiful, because King gives us an epistolary short story. It's all written in journal entries. And this is where having the text is really cool, because he kind of does what he does in Misery, where the text is art. Yeah. So there's a lot of weird letters and phrasing and misspellings, and it just becomes very artistic. And the character, Richard Pine, that's his name that he changed. It's Richard Panzetti, or Panzetti, I think. And he's just like this cocky SOB, right? Yeah. But he's one of those arrogant guys who you're like, you're a douchebag, but then you see how smart they are, you see their actual report card, and you're like, you ass, like, you're just like, fine. fine. You're hot and smart. You can be arrogant. You're just all of it and a bag of chips. Okay. And that's Richard. And he just fought and dug in, and he's like, I'm the best. I'm going to be the best, and I want to be a surgeon, and I'm also going to deal drugs because why not? I'm awesome. And then he gets on this island and he starts to struggle, and we see the descent as the reader, and I'm like, this is effing awesome. Like, oh my God. So I love the hell out of Survivor Type, and it took me a couple weeks I don't know what happened. This weird little story just kind of got in, like sand in my shoe. I was like, why am I still thinking about it? And that for me is the mark of something special. So Survivor Type is cool as hell. I loved it.
Nice. Well said. Tiny, how did you feel about Survivor Type?
Yeah, that's awesome, and I fully agree with what Kim said. I really like this one too. I think I like it better than Jaunt, just a little bit. The story was pitched to me by Kim. I had never even heard of it. So when we recorded, I mentioned how I've mentioned it on this podcast before, how isolation is one of my favorite themes in art. I love it. It speaks to me. I just saw The Thing weekend, which isolation is a huge theme in that story. I just love it. And what's so funny about this story is that isolation is a huge part of it. But it gets totally devalued because the character is such a dick and is such a narcissist and is so full of himself. He doesn't even care. Like, he doesn't care that he has no one to talk to, or that he's stranded, and it's not even an issue that he's isolated. And that's I don't know that I've really experienced that with a theme or with a story where isolation is such a big part of it. And so that was really fun, just to it's like, oh wow, he's on an island, oh that's crazy. And I immediately start getting nervous. I'm like, oh my God, that would just absolutely kill me if I was so isolated. And within a few pages or paragraphs or a few minutes of listening to it, I'm like, oh, this isn't even a factor because he's such a such a narcissist. So that's so funny how that wasn't even a factor in the story, because of the character. I think that's what's so easy to focus on with this story, is that the character completely flips so many things on its head. That's what's so fun about it, because of who he is. And then I was thinking about some of the science of this and some of the like Kim was saying. I was like, this is kind of ridiculous, but I think King does a good job navigating that, and I think he does a good job justifying it. And we'll talk about that in spoilers, but I really like this story. Again, I love the performance. I think audiobook was a good medium for this story. I would be curious to see it in physical form though, because I think it'd be fun to see the typos like Kim was saying, and see if, as he gets progressively more and more worn down physically, to see if his handwriting starts to run and get real ragged and stuff like that. That'd be fun to look at. But all in all, I'd really, really dug this story.
Nice. And yeah, this is on my list. I mean, I don't know if this is where it's going to stay as I continue going through, but it's my number one favorite Stephen King short story. It's above the Jaunt. Oh yeah. And I think it's because of just the way the places that it goes, the way it subverts the kind of, I guess you would say, traditional castaway story, in that he is intentionally making this protagonist into such an ass. Like, he is someone who is just out for himself. He is only concerned with his preservation. His ego is out of this world. He's filled with arrogance. He's not doing anything for the greater good. It's all in service of his own lifestyle, his own experience. And to put us into that perspective with that character, and then take us down the road that he goes down himself is really interesting, because the story never switches around for us. Like, it never makes us feel empathy for him to any certain extent. It is just like, oh, now he's doing this to himself to survive. Now he's doing this. Wow, that's pretty crazy. Like, all right. It's not like you're not like waiting for him to be rescued and everything. It's like, how far is this asshole going to push himself to get to like, it's such a weird thing, because it makes me like think with these types of stories, like you want to build up the character. You want him, like, you want the protagonist to succeed. You want Tom Hanks to get off the island and talk to Helen Hunt. Helen Hunt, right? Yeah. You want this to happen. But with this, it's like, well, it's probably not going to happen, but let's see him chip away at himself some more and like see, like just give up, dude. But okay. Yeah, and I'm sure that there's like some psychological stuff to it, or some subtext to it that that might be maybe a little bit above my pay grade or anything, or maybe it's something that I'm just mining too deep into. But like, just someone who is so in love with himself to do the things that he does to survive, but at the expense of himself, but also experiencing things. It's hard to say without spoiling it, but the things that he does, it's just, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Yeah, and gruesome. Yeah. Like, when we were talking about the Jaunt, Tiny mentioned The Fly, the Cronenberg movie with Jeff Goldblum, and like, that's a movie that our friend Mike has suggested that I see. It's like the top movie on his list of horror movies that I should watch. And I still haven't done it because I am terrified of David Cronenberg, and I'm terrified of body horror and everything. Yep. And weirdly enough, like, this story, I'm just like, yeah, okay, get it. Let's do it. Let's ladyfingers, yeah. It's just, it's pretty wild. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed the story. Yeah.
You're in good company. It's badass, and it's.
Oh yeah.
I love what you mentioned about this character being a narcissist and such an ass, and that's what he is. So we have zero empathy for him as the reader, which it's fascinating, right?
Oh yeah.
This guy is cast away, and we don't care if he dies. We're kind of just watching with morbid fascination of how long is it going to take you to die, bro?
Yep.
You know. But there's this fascinating grit he has. And one of the things I absolutely love, and I noticed it so much stronger in this second read, is I think he's super in love with himself, but there is one thing that he values more than that. And he's very reverent with surgery stuff. Like, he's incredibly, the way he phrases things, like, I tied off the femoral artery, and of course I used iodine because I don't want infection. And there's a lot of medical reverence, like the tone in which he talks about these procedures that he's about to do on himself. It's like, there is one thing, and it could just be he's just an arrogant surgeon and he knows he's smart, he knows he's the best, but it's fascinating. And I think King's friend, I think it's Russell Dorr, he always that was his doctor friend, and it helped him write a lot of books. I think he probably contributed quite a bit to this, because the body horror is totally there. And what I noticed is there's such a reverence with all the surgery stuff and all the medical talk. It was like he was lovingly like, well, of course I'm going to delicately wrap it, and I'm like, what is this? Why do I like you?
It's like that kind of whole God complex thing. Like, he is in control of a situation, or he has life and death in his hands, and like, he has this reverence for the tools he has, which are his hands and everything. And I was going to make the joke that it's like listening to me talk about podcast equipment, because I'm kind of an ass about that. But yeah, it's so interesting to see a character who is so in love with himself doing things to himself so that he could survive, with like the kind of underlying like subtext being that he feels, and maybe this is me projecting onto the character, but he feels that he is needed in the world. He is needed to survive. There's no outward drive that's making, like, he doesn't have like a significant other at home or anything, or he's not like, he doesn't think that he's going to cure some incurable disease or whatever. He's just like, no, I'm awesome. I'm helping sell heroin, and I am good at like surgerying people. And it's just, that arrogance is, I hate to admit it, it is very, very intoxicating and enthralling. It's just so crazy. I love it.
Same. 100%.
Yep.
And it's funny. I think what's so fun about anti-heroes is that they're not likable or they do bad things, but despite that, you want to see them win.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if this guy qualifies as an anti-hero. I think he's just a villain, and he's just terrible. And it's like almost more fun because it's like you actually want to see him fail because he's so arrogant and full of himself, and terrible that you kind of want to see him fail, but you want to see him go through some shit first. So he's got to succeed a little bit to get there.
Absolutely.
That's what's so fun about this story.
Yeah. Yep.
Totally.
Oh yeah. Do you guys want to talk about it in more specific stuff in spoilers?
I think we gotta. The ending is the reason why people remember Survivor Type, so we gotta go there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and go into spoilers for Survival Type. I'm going to play some music, check the timestamps, all that stuff. So when we come back, we're going to spoil Survivor Type. All right, so spoilers on for Survivor Type, and I don't know where to begin. This guy cuts off parts of his body to eat so that he can survive on the island. When this part happened in the book, or the story, the first time that I read it, I was like, I think like I squealed in excitement. Like, I was just thinking like, holy shit, King is going there. Like, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. And in classic King fashion, he goes into it with like an analytical approach and very detailed oriented, very process filled. And it's just, it works like gangbusters for me. So yeah, what did you think about the self-cannibalization of Survivor Type? Or self-cannibalism, I guess.
Thank you so much. So, well, firstly, how it gets started, and I think this is important to talk about, is our character Richard breaks his foot. So he breaks his foot really bad, compound fracture. He lets the reader know, my foot is super messed up to the point where I'm in excruciating pain. And him being a very knowledgeable surgeon, he's like, I think I might have to amputate. Like, there's no way around this. So the amputation came out of necessity, but then he, I believe, eats his foot. I don't, he eats the other foot a little bit later. But
yeah.
I think I was shocked. I was shocked by this self-cannibalization, but what kind of came in there that snuck in and wouldn't let go is the same kind of thing that happened to me with the Jaunt. And that was the sort of plausibleness of it all. And I was like, okay, buddy, you are starving, you're dehydrated, you are, at that point, I don't know if he had used the heroin yet, but you are suffering from exposure, you are wounded and burned. You would not have survived that amputation. I believe you would have bled to death. I believe you. I'm sorry. I just can't work. So I had a hard time. So because I was like, oh, no way. This is just no way. Reading the other as he chops off the calf and then the thigh. and then the other thigh until he's a crawling stump. I was like, okay, you would have died like 10 days ago. Like, you just would have died. I just don't feel that you're that good. I do know he had his medical bag, I believe, with him from the wreck. So I did my very best to suspend my disbelief. I really tried hard. But I was like, I think you just would have died, bro. You just would have bled to death. And, like, without food, you're not clotting. Like, I got a B in anatomy, so I didn't do that well. But I was like, Steve, he would have died, okay? Like, this is impossible. But at the same time, he keeps balancing it out in the narrative. Like, he eats some of his own flesh there, he gets some vitality, he starts writing coherently, and he gets that zest of, like, I'm gonna make it out of here, and they do great things with prosthetics, and I'm gonna live. And you're like, maybe you might. This is nuts.
It's awesome, because I had the same notion when I was reading it. So I read this twice. In the first listen through, I had the exact same reaction. I was like, nope. Trauma, shock trauma, death, dead immediately. I was like, I'll give you the first mutation. I'll give you that one. I think he could pull through that, but all the other ones, no way. But listening through the second time, that kind of went away, and I think the reason is because several reasons, but firstly because literally the first line of the story is, the question always comes up, how much shock trauma can a person survive? And it's always answered by a question, how strong is the will to live of the person? Or I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it's something along those lines. That's the fun, interesting part of medical science, is there's always a factor doctors can't grasp, right? They always tell, someone gets diagnosed with cancer and the doctor's like, you got 6 months to live. They live for 5 years, right? That's just one of those things that doctors can't grasp. They can't understand a person's willpower. And so that theme and that idea is reiterated several times throughout the story. And so I think King kind of balances the uncanny valley of that with that idea. And I appreciated that on the second read through much more. Also, this guy is such a stubborn asshole. He won't let himself die. And I mean, he's literally there saying like, oh, a lesser man would have passed out from the shock, but I didn't. I think he is so ridiculous that he could have overcome the shock of amputating himself so many times. There, in real life, Aaron Ralston, that's the guy who 127 hours guy, he actually amputated his arm, and he wasn't a doctor, so he didn't do it 6 times or whatever. So I'm not saying you're wrong, Kim, or that I even necessarily disagree with you. It's just I kind of saw both sides of it, especially with multiple readings of it.
Totally.
And I appreciated both sides of that argument. So that was fun to explore in this story.
Yeah, and also to be fair, Aaron Ralston didn't go back and eat the arm, so that's also that's also something. I didn't have any qualms about it. I was just gobsmacked by just the audacity of King to do this type of story. It really feels like the type of story, and there are some other stories like this in King's canon, where it feels like he has this central idea. He has this first like nugget of an idea, and and I have no idea if this is his process at all, but sometimes he has a story where he will have an idea, and I feel like the entirety of the story is him working out how to make the story as plausible as possible. Like the idea of a man eating himself to survive on an island alone. Like, okay, how can I make that plausible? How can I look under every nook and cranny of every plot hole that I can imagine and make this as realistic as possible? And since it is such an outlandish idea, you know, it varies in the amount. But like, I'm thinking of like, again, not to bring back Night Shift, but there's a story called The Mangler that is about a demon possessed piece of laundry equipment in a laundromat. And and the entire story and the entire story is him working out a logical sequence of events to make it at least plausible within the realm of your suspension of disbelief that, okay, this piece of laundry equipment can be possessed by a demon. And so I don't know, I just feel like these types of stories in King's work are just so much fun to see him work out the process of it, and Survivor Type is a really good example of that, in my opinion. It's so out there and crazy and wild and just so much fun.
Totally. The phrase that I use for Survivor Type is over the top. The story is just over the top in every way. But one of my favorite scenes, and I don't know how this happened, but I guess once I really let go and enjoyed what I enjoyed, there's a real visceral moment when I want to say this might have been the second or third amputation, and he's drooling, like uncontrollable drooling, and he says, "I'm drooling like a baby," as he's preparing his limb and ready to eat it. And it's like, okay, we've crossed over into animal survival.
Yeah.
And he's articulating like this body response to viewing his limb as food, and I was like, all right, this is great. I'm in it. I'm into it.
That's
awesome. I'm sold.
Nice. Yeah.
Sold, Richard. Eat your leg. Get some strength.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Do you? I think another fun aspect of the story was never comes out and says, "Cutting my foot off so I can eat it." He never says that he's going cannibal. He just kind of winks at it. And I thought that was fun and clever, and it totally plays to the character because like he doesn't want to admit that he's so weak that he has to have a part of himself to eat it, or that's in almost every culture, cannibalism is considered amoral, right? That's pretty universal for the most part.
That's why we're starting a letter writing campaign to Congress to get this.
Oh my god. Taking the fight to the streets.
Yes. Bon appetit.
But no. God damn it.
I'm so sorry.
But no, I think that speaks to the character, and that was really fun that he never just comes out and says that he's like, yeah, I had to cut my foot off so I could eat it.
Good point.
Yeah.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a part there's a line where he's talking about, it's further down the line when he's doing his like fourth or fifth amputation. He talk about his hands shaking. It's implied that he's having some adverse effects because he's eating his own flesh, eating human flesh. Did I pick up on that? Did you guys pick up on that?
I think so, yeah.
I think so. And he tries to play it off like a lesser man's hands would have been shaking. Yeah. But it's alluded to his might be as well. So yeah, there is a handshaky bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you guys picked up on that because so did I. And it piqued my curiosity. This is a little morbid, but I actually went and Googled like what are the effects of cannibalism.
Oh, interesting.
Well, because I've seen in other movies,
Walking Dead was a big thing for a minute.
Yeah. In like movies and stuff and stories, someone, it's supposed to be a side effect of eating human flesh is you're get the shakes kind of. And so I Googled that and like looked it up, and it turns out that that's like just kind of fun fact. Well, I don't know about fun, but morbid fact, I guess. There's some tribe in, I want to say like New Guinea or something that someone studied, and they had, that only happens if you eat human brains. Because
wow.
it's actually kind of a myth that you get the shakes. Like if you just eat regular muscle tissue, you're fine. But it comes from brain tissue. There was something that affected the tribal people in New Guinea for decades because it's part of like their funeral process. They would actually eat their loved ones and they would eat the brain. And there's some kind of protein that your body can't break down or something like that it's only in brain tissue, and it's actually like they think those proteins like or contribute to Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something like that. And so people get called like prion disease or something like that. I can't remember. If you're curious, Google it. But I thought it was kind of fascinating. There was this interesting article where this guy was like, let's just take the ethics out of this and just kind of look at the science. And it was kind of interesting. So that's kind of a bit of a myth that happens. It only happens if you eat the brain tissue. So
wow.
You guys know that now. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I would like to be the first to thank you for putting all of us on an FBI watch list.
Come on, we've been on that watch list for 9 years.
That's true. That's very true.
Well, I'm happy to welcome.
Yeah.
Hi, FBI. Hello.
Yes. Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely have to look into that.
I wonder where I'm sorry, Matt.
Oh, you're
I
fine.
wonder where the shake part came from, because we've seen that a lot in film with the Road. If you guys remember that Cormac McCarthy novel, that was a big thing. And then I know The Walking Dead. There were just cannibals everywhere in The Walking Dead, and meat was aplenty at certain communes. But yeah, I really wonder where. I guess it was the brain eating symptoms of the New Guinea people. Like they would they shake? Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah, that's. I guess I think the other part is there's a lot of disinformation about studying cannibalism because it's hard to study because it's not a very common thing, and that's the other aspect of it. But and that was just one article I read. There could be some other research out there that refutes that. That's not entirely scientific, but I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sure that King probably did plenty of research himself as well.
Right.
Yeah, cannibalism is definitely a crazy subject to mine, and I can't think if King has any real more of that kind of thing. I feel like there had to be something in The Stand.
Yeah.
With that,
when oh gosh, what's his name is in the jail cell?
Lloyd Henry, when he's in the jail cell. That's right. Yes,
I do remember that part. Yes, I do.
Yes.
He bites the guy's leg, takes a bite out of his leg.
That's right. Yeah.
Fun in that story too, because it's only kind of hinted at. He doesn't really come out. Lloyd doesn't come out and say, "Yeah, I ate that dude's leg." It's just sort of the Man in Black shows up and he's like, "What's going on over here? Do I see a bite out of that dude's leg?" And they just kind of. So that's, I guess.
Such a jerk. Like
yes. Oh yeah.
He's such a butthole. I love it.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys about that last line, the line that closes out the story.
Yeah.
Because the sort of, we are in the spoiler section, right?
Yes.
I think we are. Okay, I couldn't remember. Maybe my brain got eaten.
Nice.
So the last line of Survivor Type is very cool because basically throughout the story, Richard wants to protect his hands. He talks about when he was in football, he would like soak them and lotion them, and he just has such protection and reverence over his hands because he's a surgeon. And so in the very last moment of the story, he eats his hands and he says they taste like lady fingers.
Yeah.
And lady fingers are cookies. So a part of me was like, I don't know about that, Steve, but he's delirious at that point and a human stump. He has no legs, and he is now, the hands are gone, and the fingers, I'm assuming, are being eaten, taste like cookies. And I was like, why did you gotta ruin that? Tiramisu is my favorite dessert, Steve. Like, really?
Nice.
But I kind of, that last line, I don't know. I guess my question is does it work? Does they taste like cookies?
I can't say from experience, but I'm sure that they don't. um, unless he had like maybe a deep fryer or something, or something to make it. I don't know. But I will say, like, I would think that the copious amounts of heroin in his system probably contributed. King actually retweeted on the 14th, he retweeted someone saying, rereading Survivor Type by Stephen King for reasons. The person was, I can't remember who it is, but, and then King just retweeted it with the quote, "Ladyfingers." Yeah.
It's an odd one for me. It's odd, but it's kind of one of those. It's like Rosebud. You're like, okay, all right, we're just gonna go with it.
Oh yeah,
that's a good comparison. Actually, I think it was just kind of fun because it speaks to his delirium, you know, at the end. And I wasn't familiar with Ladyfingers. I had to Google that. I didn't even know what that was, but kind of funny.
Yeah.
All the bakers out there, when you read Survivor Type, just brace yourself.
Oh yeah,
you're never gonna see Ladyfinger cookies the same.
Yes.
You won't. It's just gonna happen.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if human fingers taste like ladyfinger cookies, but you can really work some wonders with powdered sugar. You know,
you really can.
True. I wonder if he just had heroin all over his fingers and he's just eating heroin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I would at that point, I think.
Oh yeah. I think we have the makings of a pretty good spread for a hypothetical Stephen King like party. Like having like ladyfingers and stuff, having some other food. Yeah. I like that. But King had said also, he's quoted as saying about the story that as far as short stories are concerned, I like the grisly ones the best. However, the story Survivor Type goes a little bit too far, even for me. That's from an interview in 1985 with Monsterland magazine, and yeah, I think that it goes pretty far, and I appreciate the hell out of it for it. Yeah,
it's so likable. Mm-hmm. It's so likable, and it was just I'm so surprised at the fascinating after effects that Survivor Type had on me.
Yeah.
I tried to just be like one and done, and then just thinking about it. It's coming up on the podcast. I get to talk about it, and I was like, okay, I love this story. Like, okay, like what happened? I don't get it. I hate this character. Mm-hmm. He's a narcissistic ass. But the structure of this is great.
Yeah.
He just makes it's compelling.
Yeah.
Totally sucked me in. This is such a wild card for me. Mm-hmm. I think that's why I'm just trying to understand, like, why do I like you, Survivor? Why? And it's I'm struggling, but I'm just like, you know what? It's awesome. It's just awesome.
Nice. And and where would you guys rank this if you were to rank the short stories or anything in Stephen King's oeuvre?
I don't have a list, but this one, when I eventually get there, this one will probably be pretty high on it.
Nice.
Top 5, top 10, probably. This was so fun. Also, just real quick, I wanted to say I love how the narcissism comes full circle because he actually, towards the end, he actually looks at his reflection in the water.
Oh, yeah.
He reacts perfectly because he doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't say like, "Oh, I look great," or "I look terrible." He just says, "I'm just a skull with skin over it," or something like that. He's not even really affected by.
Yeah.
Why did you even bother looking at your reflection? Because he almost doesn't react to it. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, I love the story, and this is going to be high on my list. I think it's and it's funny because it was pitched to me by Kim with the aspect of isolation, and it's like. It's not even my favorite part. It's not even one of my top 5 favorite parts of this story. It's all the other things. So that's just a fun twist, I guess, on this story. Yeah, it was awesome. Great recommendation, Kim.
Yay!
Yeah.
I am so perplexed as to what this story has done to me. I just am like, I don't get it. I love it. I love the hell out of it. I love this narrator. I love the structure, the style, the bombastic, over-the-top nature of it. I'm just such a fan. I think this could crack into the bronze. So it
Nice.
could maybe make it into the bronze. I have a scale of 5 gold, 5 silver, 5 bronze for a top 15.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it could crack into the bronze for sure. As we'll have to see as time tells, as I have more Stephen King short stories to rank. But this one really ran away with me the second time. So could be a bronze.
Nice. That's awesome. So we can kind of start wrapping up, winding down and everything. That is our review of Survivor Type. And yeah, definitely recommend everyone to read it and experience it and let us know what you thought, because it is a wild one. It is absolutely wild. So, as we're winding down, I want to give you first our extreme thanks for coming on the show and talking to us about King, and just being a joy to talk to as always. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys. I love you both tremendously. I'm such a fan of all the work you guys do, so thank you so much for having me on here. It's like, I feel like I'm the tricycle wheel in the back, and I'm the little sister that's really annoying, but your guys are like, just take her. She'll just tag along in the back. So I'm very, very so thrilled to get to be with you guys and chat King.
Nice. Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure and not annoying at all, I promise. So why don't you go ahead and give the listeners another elevator pitch for your show. Tell us where we can find your work, and also what would be the one underrated Stephen King work that you would want everyone to read that you feel is underappreciated? I think I've probably asked you that before on the podcast, but let's do it again.
Okay. But yes, my name is Kim C. I am the hostess with the mostest of the year of underrated Stephen King. We are almost at our 100th episode, so it's been a wonderful ride thus far. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, all of the big ones, Spotify, so you can find us wherever. You can also type in Stephen King Podcast, and hopefully we'll pop up. It's me in a purple mask, so I can just be a woman of mystery and behind my book, my Stephen King book. Right now, we are making our way through Wizard and Glass, so hopefully that'll take us into the summer. We're going to have some more novel analyses coming up. Oh, picking just one, Matt, just one.
I know.
How torturous. Torture. Well, if I honestly, gosh, Duma Key, I feel, is one of the most underrated gems out there. This thing is covered in beach sand. It is a gothic novel set in Florida. This has art and dark goddess, sea monster, hand of doom. This is just an amazing novel. If I want to be a huge brat and sneak in two more, Revival.
Absolutely.
But
Revival?
Revival and Joyland. Those are
nice.
Those would be my recommendations to anybody who wanted to dip their toe in the water of underrated King. These need film adaptations today.
Yes.
All three of these need some sort of adaptation because they are fire hot, unforgettable, worth the ride. The audiobooks for all of them are amazing. Well, if you want to give it a second chance, but we talk about all three of them on the Year of Underrated Stephen King, so hopefully you'll hang out with us and come to school where we'll talk about King like you would in a classroom.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And Tiny, do you have any underrated Stephen King you want to throw out?
Oh, underrated Stephen King. And she kind of, well, of course, Kim had to do 3 of them. So I'm kidding.
Right, bratty sister. I told you.
I'll double down on Duma Key because I think we talked about that the other day. The ending is a little goofy, and I didn't jive with the ending, but the journey was so fun, and the main characters I loved, so I kind of holds a place in the back of my head. Duma Key, so that's a good pick. I'll double down on that.
Nice,
hooray,
nice. And I'll throw out Night Shift again because I love it. All right, well, that will do it for this special edition of Tower Junkies. Almost forgot the name of the podcast. So thank you once again, Kim C. And you guys, make sure you check out Kim's podcast. And it's a delight to have you on and to chat with you again. As we wind down, just another quick plug, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, doing the Church of King. I've got a ton of stuff on there at the $2 level. At $1 level, you get B-roll episodes and early access to content. $2 gets you book reviews, TV reviews, movie reviews, a bunch of stuff, and then $5 gets you commentary tracks and Patreon potpourri, which is just me talking about movies I see, and then $10 gets you all of that plus monthly wrap up and stat sharing for my viewing because I'm insane. So anyway, check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Kim, thank you so much for joining us, and we will definitely have you back soon. We still need to do our big hard case crime series. I have not forgotten about that.
Oh my god, yes!
Yes,
we got it.
That is definitely gonna be done. So thank you, and our sign out. Long days and pleasant nights.
May you have twice the number.
May you have twice the number. I know what that means now.
Nice. Awesome. And now, here's a short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. To hear the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. So, Howie, the narrator of the story, is writing down his thoughts as he has just taken a drug that is going to kill him. It is going to end his life. He has exposed himself to the thing that has ended, a very, very large amount of humanity. So as time is unfolding, as he is like rushing toward his death, he is writing out this story. And I've got to say that if you're a fan of Kim C's podcast, The Year of Underrated Stephen King, you'll know that she is a big champion of reading the physical story while also listening to the audiobook and kind of doing that hand in hand. This is the perfect example for a story that belongs that yearns to be experienced in that format, because as the story progresses, the narrator's mental faculties very, very drastically deteriorate, and as such, the writing gets very, very degraded, and the grammar is all wrong, the spelling is all wrong. And what's really interesting about this is that this happens relatively suddenly toward the end of the story. Toward the end of the story, this just kind of rushes up to us. And I really, really like that because it gives us plenty of time to get all of this information out from King. And then as it accelerates very rapidly, it just kind of lands with a big punch at the end. So I really appreciate that about the story.
This podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.